Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Hearts of Iron 4 The New Order Last Days of Europe with me, Mega, and Empire of Japan. So in the last episode, the crisis in Madagascar has ended, so I'm hoping we're gonna get some follow-up because I would hate for the Americans to snag such a prize, but we'll see. On the other hand, Amur is for some reason losing the war against Magadan, which by all means should not be happening because Magadan has about half the army that Amur has. It has about 1/3 of the factories. How is Amur losing this? I just don't understand that, but unfortunately we cannot send any reinforcements to it. Even though it's a member of the co-prosperity sphere, I guess the guys will just have to deal with it on their own. But I just wanted to mention a couple of things that I recently learned while reading your comments. Somebody mentioned that Amur has a really interesting story based on Konstantin Rodzaevsky, the Vozhd of the Russians. So I would like to just read it with you, who this guy is, because supposedly he has one of the saddest stories in all of the Russian, or out of all of the Russian warlords. Konstantin Vladimirovich Rodzaevsky was always a man of the East. The perceived oppression of the new Soviet system, which he despised from a young age, pushed him to flee Blagoveshchensk in the Union for Harbin, the city in which the emigres thrived. There, he became convinced that a system to rival Bolshevism had to be created. He found that system in Europe, where fascism had just been born. The nascent ideology was adopted by many Russians, bitter from their loss in the Civil War. A young and charismatic Rodzaevsky grabbed the chance to unite them all under the banner of the swastika, setting crowds on fire with his speeches. He made a promise to return to his homeland one day and liberate its people. Shortly after its foundation, the Russian Fascist Party forged a close relation with the new overlords of Manchuria, Japan. The greatest benefactor of this party supported it through its entire existence until the opportunity for reclamation came with the collapse of the Presidium. Emboldened by the enthusiasm of his Japanese allies, the leader of the RFP went on a noble crusade to crush Judeo-Bolshevism. However, his dreams of complete liberation were dashed by his rivals, the generals under Tsar, and worst of all, Mikhail Matkovsky and his band of traitors who looked across the Pacific for help. Konstantin Rodzaevsky, left alone in Zeya as the leader of a mere warlord state, had become enraged and has vowed to get revenge against all of Russia's enemies, whomever they may be. Jews, Reds, Matkovskites, Tsarists, anyone who dares challenge the Vozhd. To him, it is the only way to restore the nation to its old days of glory, yet that the dream seems further and further away. It really seems like an interesting story, and they have a pretty decent focus tree, so it might be fun to actually try to play someone like, the Vozhd. I know there's a lot of, distinct nations here that you can play and use, but Amur might be fun. Well, I'll keep it in mind. Second thing is that I am absolutely, completely oblivious to some of the unsettling hints that the game has given me. For those of you that do not know, I'm just gonna say a little bit very short because it is absolutely despicable. During the Second Sino-Japanese War, the Japanese had a special unit located in Manchuria, which was... They had a... I don't even want to call it a concentration camp. It was a place of horrors where they basically took the prisoners of various distinctions. Mostly it was political prisoners, but also women, children, and they made experiments on them, which were unbelievable. They were, in my opinion, it was way worse than what the Nazis did. They did live vivisections, they, dehydrated people while they were alive, of course. They used various diseases to infect them. It was just unbelievable. I read a number of documents about them, and it's just horrifying. One of the things that they talk, though, and that is very distinct about this, is that they didn't talk about people, but instead they said that the prisoners in their camp, or they referred to the prisoners in their camp as to logs of wood, basically, because the cover story for it was that the camp was a lumber mill. Very early in the beginning, we had one event where there was a note that someone requested 150 logs for something in Manchuria. I don't remember. It was like episode 3 or 4. And what I didn't connect is that because the Second World War was won by Japan, this camp of horrors would still be located in Manchuria, and this was reference to it. So, Jesus Christ, yeah, that's just what I wanted to say. Japanese did unthinkable things during the Second World War, and they were in no way, the clearer of the two parties. The Nazis did their horrors in Europe, but somehow it always felt like, the Nazis were a bit more direct about it. They exterminated people, and that was their goal, with the, few exceptions like what Mengele did. But the Japanese were just, brutal. So, yeah, we have this dark past with us, and I wonder if the game is going to tackle it somehow, because whether it was the comfort women, whether it was this camp of horrors, whether it was the rape of Nanjing, the horrifying things that the Japanese did throughout the war should eventually come to the forefront. And I actually want to say that it's kind of funny, because I have a lot of Japanese friends, and even today, these things that they did during the Second World War are fairly taboo in Japan. They do not speak about them, and they are mostly ignored, and I'd say deliberately so, because they're probably just hoping that the world will forget about them, which is why I love history so much, and why I think things like this should be taught, because the single-mindedness of the Japanese that you see today was used in the past for the darkest things. Anyway, that's all that I wanted to mention, and thank you to whomever, I forgot who it was, that pointed this out to me, but Jesus Christ, just shaking here. Okay, so we finished 2 destroyers, Shigure and Kawakaze, so let's add them to our training fleet and let them drill, and we're just gonna continue. I do wonder how the story of Tachi and Kodaira is gonna continue, which I believe might be here. No, probably not. Yunin rested on the cold stone bench, the wind blowing south through the garden. In her arms, she cradled her grandchild, Seigi, nestled softly in a white blanket, her legacy. The tree behind her rustled suddenly, startling her, which startled Seigi. On reflex, Eugene rocked her, cradling her to sleep, yet she remained fussy, her short arms reaching towards the blue sky. Soft shushing, nor reassurances that everything was all right would calm the child. As she cooed and called out to no one and everyone, Eugene, I guess? It would be Eugene. Yeah, Eugene wondered what Seigi would be like when she got older. Would she even see her reach adulthood? Eugene shook her head, admonishing herself. But there was a far more immediate concern. What if her very own grandchild didn't understand Korean? What would happen then? She may be a baby now, but what about when she attends school? A song came into her head, a favorite of hers, and she sang it to Seigi. When the mercury lamps bloom in the evening. Eugene's eyes swept the garden, bursting with bright flowers, of white, of red, of blue. She looked into Seigi's eyes, the brightest flowers of them all. I'm pacing this path I used to walk alone with you. She caressed Seigi's face, smiling down at her. The child smiled in return, showing off her growing teeth. Eugene kissed her forehead, touching her nose. The soft white of a mercury lamp does not change. The wind picked up as Eugene rocked Soegi harder. She yawned, and Eugene tucked her further into the blanket. "And you don't seem to have as well," she chuckled, as Soegi's eyes drooped further and further. Under the light of a mercury lamp. Soegi fell asleep, her only movement being her breathing. Eugene rose from the bench, walking to the nursery. Placing Soegi into a cradle, Eugene rocked it slowly. She walked away, turned off the lights, and closed the door silently. Sweet dreams, child. Well, we're getting more and more stories from Korea, which is under so much pressure to be Japanized. Scary stuff. Okay, so we finished the Special Forces training. Death chance of our operatives on capture plus 10%. Chance of recruiting an operative with the commando trait plus 100%, and operative detection chance offset minus 0.05%. So what next? Global training centers. Sure, that's gonna be the right way to go. Betrayal from on high. Everyone knew that the Bureau of Public Order, in theory the civilian police's representative to the Emperor, was in reality a fair-weather friend of their juniors. The Bureau seldom did its assigned work these days, focusing instead on arcane power games in the Byzantine structures of the Empire. Even so, nobody had quite expected the about-face the Bureau now made. The about-face? Nobody had quite expected the about-face. It's a bit weird. In orders crafted to maximum humiliation, the Bureau essentially dressed down the entire team for acting above their pay grade, station and status before the Emperor. This was fairly normal treatment and to be expected, but what surprised the team was the blunt demand of the corpus of the investigation, evidence and all, to be moved to Bureau headquarters and safekept for an indefinite period. The reasons cited were the preservation of the dignity of the government and the Emperor, as well as the need to safeguard potentially sensitive data. Uninspiring, but effective. So everybody is now trying to hush it. Interesting. In ordinary circumstances, the orders ordering them to stop could at least have been published, but this order was classified so highly that to release it would have been an immediate death sentence for most of Kodaira and Tachi's team. It was an outrage and an impediment of justice, but you could admire the handiwork. Dazed and confused, the team halted work. A missive seething with rage and vitriol was redrafted, and hastily sent to the shredder before it could do any harm. Stabbed in the back, and there to blame. Resistance from without. No one was sure when the low-grade civil war brewing in the Diet and the imperial government at large had quieted to a simmer, but somehow the worst has passed. Nobody knew why, but most of the team were thankful that the world around them has remained somewhat intact, even as the military fell apart. It was reassuring to know that Japan hadn't yet become a military state, and was in fact increasingly unlikely to do so, given the state of its armed forces. One evening, a letter was received from the Imperial General Headquarters, an anonymous typescript and generic government-issue letterhead. It was similar in content to countless other missives received that week, all of which ordered the team to cease and desist under the pretext of protecting the dignity of the Emperor. What was different was what came after. The signage of the letter read like a who's who of the most powerful members of the imperial government, senior members of the Diet and Cabinet. The army, the navy, and the headquarters itself had all penned signatures in person. Kodaira's files indicated that half of these individuals were embroiled in intrigue against each other in the upper heavens of the government's chambers. If this were the case, how did they all end up signing the same petition? The answer arrived in the form of a team from the headquarters the following week, brandishing a warrant for immediate audit for suspected treasonous activities against the Emperor. As they searched the office, ignoring the cries of the already overburdened investigation team, Kodaira found in their warrant the seals of a half-dozen major ministerial appointments, but above them was the thick, unmistakable seal of Kokusei's council. It was now clear to everyone who the Thousand Temples were, and why the government had closed ranks. What could be done to stop them, however? My God, how deep does this run? Well, so everybody is on it. And they're all working together against us. No, not against us, against Kodaira and Tachi, but... oh well. Okay, our volunteer forces came back home. This is done. Let's safeguard a little bit of the political power. We don't need to do anything here, I think. The government locked down. Kodaira was tired, even by the standards of the Metropolitan Police of the Jewel of the East. A sleepless man for a sleepless city, dancing on the edge of collapse. The investigation and months of his team's time appeared to be slipping into the gutter, and there was little he could do to stop it. He was reminded of the old stories of children playing with the gods, pretending at equal status. He poured through the documents. The seals on the letters corresponded to senior positions in the government, but they seemed to have come from somewhere else. Analysis of the seals' imprints revealed that this was a wax used for financial purposes. Why had the letter been stamped with accounting seals rather than executive ones? And what did this mean for the investigation? A cursory search of the involving records the team had captured revealed nothing. That's interesting. All the seals they had on record corresponded to senior executives whose names they already knew in ministries slated for audit. Pictures of contracts they'd captured revealed them nothing as well. The seal's identity and function eluded him. Kodaira worked through the night, chasing the paperwork in expanding spirals, and by the next morning he had an answer for the very confused Tachi. The seals on the letter had been found in the Minezaka records they'd seized in the fishing factory, and the peculiar thing was that the seals hadn't been found in an isolated one or two places. Out of 371 documents seized by the initial investigation, 320 of them had a match for one or more seals used. It had slipped past the initial investigation. Most government firms had ministerial seals for documentation and approval, but no one could be ignored. The government wasn't above this scandal. It was right there in the mud with the rest of them. Another set of criminal states. Okay, we have a new nation on the table. Xinjiang Border Defense Administration. Where did you come from? The Federation of Novosibirsk and Altai declared war on the Principality of Kemerovo. Magadan just keeps advancing. Well, the guys are fighting everywhere else. Okay, so you're fighting Tomsk. Okay, hold on. Okay, so you guys have nothing. You got 13 factories. You got... yeah, okay, you're screwed. Tomsk will win. Don't forget. Okay, let's go with the facade cracks. They trained Tachi in rudimentary middleman tactics in hostage negotiation seminars, but Tachi had never expected to use them like this. Two teams of the most powerful agencies in Japan were snapping at each other, with members of his own team desperately trying to get both sides to stand down. Hands to holster, the police department held its breath. The Imperial General Headquarters had sent a team of specialist bureaucrats to commandeer what evidence could be taken to safeguard it for the Emperor's protection in a facility guarded by themselves. It was unfortunate that they'd happened to meet a team from the Bureau of Public Order sent to commandeer what evidence could be taken for the exact same purpose. Now they glared at each other, the team heads practically throwing warrants at each other in effort to prove the other an inferior in carrying out the Emperor's will. Looking at the two of them, Tachi had an idea. Didn't the other wars say that enemies were best defeated when divided? And didn't they possess significant reserves of evidence that everyone wanted, but only one agency could keep? The plan formed in his mind then, and festered through the rest of the day into a full-blown strategy. If they could pull it off, survival would be a possibility, and a slim hope was better than none at all. Divide, conquer, and survive. Don't forget. The afternoon sun shone through the window of Jisu's apartment as 15 children were strewn about, sitting in chairs, her couch, or cushions on the floor. Now repeat after me, Jisu put the pointer onto the chalkboard. Seagulls don't cry over the sea. The children leaned closer to the board, trying to read and mimic her. A desk creaked as it moved closer to the front of the room. Seagulls don't cry over the sea. The students squinted their eyes, clearly struggling to read. Jisu stopped herself from yelling. These were just children who were learning. They would get it eventually. I hope you all have studied this, because you're going to be reciting this to me one by one next week, she warned the students. An unintelligible cacophony of affirmatives erupted from the students as Jisu returned to the chalkboard. The pointer swept across the second line of characters, and Jisu read it. Tears are wet in the water bowl, and the Yaogori, she read out. This time her students read it nearly perfectly. Nodding, she moved on. A small boat on the far horizon. Oh, today you're not gone. The teacher pointed to a picture depicting exactly what she recited. A small boat on the far horizon. Oh, today you're not gone. The students repeated. Nice work. I'll be picking on students to read a part of the lyrics. Von Hyung, you go first. And so the students read the lyrics, with Jisu giving them feedback in between. Seogiya, go a bit slower next time. As the last of the students left, Jisu prayed for their success, but also that they wouldn't forget where they came from. Korea, not Japan. Chinks in the armor. At this point the team was so used to overnight meetings called at an hour's notice that scarcely anyone really cared about the infringement on personal time. Between the 10 or so members gathered, only a couple had children, and all were so exhausted by the investigative efforts that few had actually visited their parents in months. Even so, they hoped perhaps this would be the last push, the final struggle to some imagined victory, and as the details were laid out in the flickering lights of the rooms, that hope only grew. Kodaira and Tachi reorganized the team for the umpteenth time, focusing on 3 major conflict vectors under the ragged imperial umbrella: the Bureau of Public Order, the Diet, and the Army and Navy. The latter were undergoing a full-scale internal reorganization, complete with occasional gunfight, but still possessed enough internal cohesion to be a potential threat to the other 2. And the plan was simple at heart. Turn the 3 agencies against each other in such a way that the conflict would escalate and spill into the courts, forcing the release of the documents they needed. The Trojan horse lay ready for entrance into the 3 separate Troys, a series of invoices with seals from all 3 agencies, with Minezaka logistics, army money, and navy shipping. More than enough to nab all 3, but just enticing enough to convince each agency to fight the other 2 for ownership. And if all 3 agencies were to be seduced at the same time. Tachi smiled. It was time to turn the government upside down. One last roll of the die. One last gambit. Jesus Christ, that's gonna be a nightmare. But we'll see. Okay, you guys just came back. Could we switch this second Kutei Heishidan to 1963 Teishin Shudan? We could. We have enough. Amazing. So will that be enough to drill you? Or more we need to... Well, I mean, if it's not enough to drive you, then all the better for us. Smile at the ministers. The offer was transparent appeasement at best. That was really the best that could be managed, and given the dire straits that every branch of the government were in, even an offer like this could easily be the best. Best of the one the Diet might receive. After all, they were on the brink too, and they would have to take any opportunity possible to try and save themselves as what seemed like the entire government collapsed around them into the boiling sea of corruption and disorganization. The proposal was simple. If worded to be long-winded and noble to flatter the Diet. Given the conflicts of interest elsewhere in the government and the possibility for further damage, the Diet was the best organization left to safeguard evidence regarding the investigation. Their cooperation would surely shield them from much of the upcoming chaos, and their assistance would prove their dedication to justice and the innocence of many Diet members. They would safeguard the evidence from the corrupt and prying eyes elsewhere in the government, and the Navy reaping all the benefits of doing so. Tachi and Kodaira had worded the letter to be just right, hopefully appealing to the sense of urgency and desire to remain safe that the Diet members all felt. They hoped that it would be enough to win an ally, at least for the moment. Flattery is an ever-powerful tool. Wave false hope at the soldiers. Kodaira's contact in the military had dried up faster than a Saharan drought after the investigation started to have real repercussions, but he knew that they were one of the last hopes for the two detectives. The entire government and the military were gunning to seize evidence and shut down the investigation, and Kodaira knew that they were all in far too deep to let this go down. He could see justice or die trying, and he would take any help he could get to see that happen. Several of his old contacts, people he had once considered true friends, flat out refused to meet with him. Eventually, however, he had met with a few of them, those who knew there were no other options. The offer was simple. They and their soldiers in the army and navy would safeguard evidence pertinent to the investigation. In return, their reputation could still be safeguarded, and perhaps they would survive and make it to the other side after this whole debacle settled down. Every time he made the offer, he knew it was a lie, but the people he talked to were so desperate for any chance to escape that they agreed. Even a hope that they knew deep down was false was better than the chasm they faced currently. Kodaira just wished that they had never put themselves in this situation in the first place. One last favor, old friends. And wink at the bureau. Tachi was tired. He had been working non-stop for literal months now. He truly could not remember the last time he had slept properly. He had gotten 5 hours of sleep a few weeks ago, and it felt like an eternal slumber compared to what he was usually running on. This general tiredness made it extremely difficult to conduct a proper meeting with an outside representative, which was exactly what Tachi was trying to do. A lot hung on this meeting, and if the Bureau chose not to comply, it could be the straw that broke the camel's back. Tachi decided to, for once in his entire ordeal, cut the shit and talk frankly. No more flowery language and dancing around what was really on the table. He set out the offer as so. The Bureau of Public Order would assist in the storage and safekeeping of evidence so that hostile and potentially corrupt forces within the government could not seize them. In exchange, Tachi promised that if the evidence was secure, then the investigation could be turned to political benefit the Bureau. His upfront manner surprised the people he was meeting with, but the response was promising. They continued their endless game of double meanings and non-incriminating, vague half-statements, but Tachi was able to gather that they were accepting the deal. He left the building with a tad of optimism and resolved to take a nap sometime. They might just help us. That is smart. You just pit everyone against them and cover in the shadow while they take it on each other. Smart man. Okay, the attack helicopter company is coming in one day, so we're gonna check on that one. Release the bait and the tiebreakers. Okay, hold on. We need to read this, and then we're gonna look at the company that we have just finished researching. Tiebreakers. Madagascar's constitutional convention lasted for weeks without a clear victory. Tafama delegates argued with Padism over every detail: the shape of their government, the role of the executive, the checks and balances the judiciary could place on the legislative assembly. Not even the date of declaring the nation's independence was safe from their endless arguments. Even a match, the factions could not reach the clear majority needed to guarantee victory. This only led to more arguments, within and without. In a short time, the entire interim government was paralyzed by bickering. They bickered so much that they didn't notice the crowd outside until it was too late. One day, after the patience of the Malagasy had run out, a wave of bodies stormed into the convention hall. They bore guns and shields, beating back security and corralling every delegate into a conventional hall. Then a man, they hadn't seen him before, likely an emissary of a more prominent figure, stood on a stage, declared this constitutional convention null and void. Tafama and Padism delegates were brought out of the hall in chains, as AKFM took their place, heirs to the gridlock. Some are bold enough to call it a third Malagasy uprising, though the revolutionaries who now occupy Tanarive prefer to call it the end of the second. The moment when the people cut through the internecine debating of an incipient bourgeoisie and took command of their own destinies, along with the Democratic Republic. Okay, so here comes the communists to screw everyone over. Left-wing nationalism, Central Committee. A Red Dawn arrives in Madagascar. The AKFM now controls the Constitutional Convention in Antananarivo, while their opposition awaits in prison or in exile. Now it is their turn to decide what a truly free Madagascar requires. All within the Central Committee are certain that they will create a socialist, largely isolated state. It is a matter of specifics now, specifics that will define the nation. The party's heterodox thinking is in many ways a product of its creation. Homegrown in a hostile colony, the AKFM never had the years of exile that allowed its rival parties to hone a party line. Instead, it has always cast a wide net, seeking all those who are willing to fight for the people's and not foreign interest. Now, as the time comes to formalize the nature of the state, this loose arrangement must sadly be dismantled. But do not mistake the disunity for a lack of spirit or discipline. The party is unlikely to crack in the coming days. Whatever choice is made, the vast majority of leadership is sure to obey it. What matters is this: even for those in the party, none know what form this new People's Madagascar might take. Okay, and release debate. As Tachi spoke into the microphone, Kodaira anxiously watching aside, his voice trembled with a sense that every word he gave to the radio waves would be quoted in Japanese history forever. The inner circle of the government, the investigation team selected to release the transaction in Voice's history and extensive documentation, is not an airtight one. Yet the extraordinary circumstances they cite threaten the future of the entire nation itself. He ends the broadcast and sends the files to the officials listening in shock, and in less than an hour later the three agencies are set aflame. With the crimes of the Army, Navy, and the Diet implicated with dozens of pieces of evidence for every transgression, government hearings have been filed and are already set in order to acquire the damning records. The halls of Tokyo are filled with the disorganized shouting and the exasperated screaming of those named, each agency clamoring for its access, each giving different reasons as to how they are fit to secure it, for the good of the Japanese people and the emperor. It seems as if their desperation will be for naught. Can there even be a victor? Well, I don't care, honestly. We're burning this house down. So the attack helicopter company 2 is way ahead of time. Instead, let's work on the maintenance company 3. Making sure that our troops always have the basic materials in the field to perform common repairs will prevent the continued use of damaged equipment and make later repairs easier to do so. And let us check what it is the new company that we have is. So is that it is. Okay, so this is a special company that helps quite significantly. So what's the difference between them and the air assault company? The air assault company is better, as it turns out. Okay, so we could put it in there instead of the signal company. Organization will go up, interesting. We would lose the initiative, but instead we would get 74.2 breakthroughs, soft attack and hard attack plus further roughly, defense increased, organization HP, piercing go up, and we will get massive bonuses to attack and movement everywhere. What would this mean for us? For the motorized. Okay, just 48 attack helicopters needed. So that's not too bad. Could we maybe even add... Okay, you are all way too big. And we don't have enough to add the... Because I want to give them the motorized anti-tank. Or motorized... No, we need to do the motorized anti-tank. Yeah, the ones are... Or the motorized anti-air could be an option. But I think our air attack is pretty good. So motorized anti-tank will be better. Defense of the tank. Yeah, it would fix the issue we have with hard attack. Okay, so let's do this. Now we get rid of the signal company. And I think I'm gonna switch the third part of our expeditionary force to that as well. I mean, we don't have the heavy self-propelled artillery, or enough of it anyway, but we'll just, deal with that. We'll get it eventually. Still no national focus tree available for us. Construction, on the other hand, is advancing, which is really nice. Production units are not okay. We need to do it this way. And we are working on everything. Stockpiling the political power. Really, really good. Okay, so thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next episode.